Monsters, ghouls, urban legends, leprechaun. I love talking about the supernatural, and my obsession with speculative creatures has combined with my love of history and science. And so I'm here to explain my tier list of the cryptids that are most likely to exist or have existed. I know the title seems like clickbait, but bear with me, it's an interesting discussion. Just sit down. I'm going to be using the term cryptids very loosely as a shorthand term for supernatural living organisms, so don't crucify me. And speaking of crucifixion, some legends fall into religious, mythological, or spiritual territory. I'm going to keep my reasoning as secular as possible, while referencing religion and culture as a point of interest. Let's get started. I'm putting ghosts at the bottom because it's very speculative. There's not a lot of tangible evidence.
It is unfortunate that Aaron's camera is a bit blurry at this time, but as we reverse and forward the footage, you can indeed see that the bloody dollar bill moves.
Personally, I like to think that living things have some sort of spirit, or at least an energy that transfers out of them after death. This energy can remain stagnant on this plane of existence, and appear to us, forming what we think are ghosts. It can reincarnate as another living thing or be reborn as a star. Maybe it could ascend to a higher plane and become a cosmic entity of some kind. If you look up "Are ghosts real?", you'll get a million lackluster answers. My favorite experiment in this field was the 21 grams experiment, published in 1907 by Duncan McDougall. The purpose was to weigh somebody before and after death to see the mass lost by a human when the soul departed the body. Personally, I feel like a spirit would be much less tangible than that, but I respect the effort. The 21 grams experiment was tested on humans and dogs with inconclusive results. The several human test subjects lost inconsistent amounts of weight, with some patients losing and then regaining their weight, and others losing some briefly and then more even later. It was reported that the dogs lost no weight upon death. The debate on ghosts is a struggle between faith and science that I don't want to delve too deeply into.
I am the Bax Ghost!
Life, death, and energy are all strange concepts that may never be fully understood, at least not by living people. Obviously, there's many personal accounts of people seeing ghosts and being haunted, and while I like to believe some of them, it's hard to prove them in a controlled environment when accounting for mental states, hallucinogenics, or magnetic fields. You also have instances of ghosts being captured on photographs or in videos, and just nothing definitive about them. Ghosts used to be viewed as solid beings that could appear and disappear at will. The stereotype of ghosts being translucent, floating entities arose with the development of cameras and phantasmagoria shows. I like to ride on the side of ghosts could be real. At the very least, it just makes life more interesting. Now, I'm not a big supporter of the Loch Ness Monster theory, but it is one of those things where it'd be very cool if it's true. The first reported sighting was in the 500s AD, believe it or not, but it was documented over a century later in The Life of St. Columba by Adamnan. It describes a water beast that mauled a man on the River Ness. Loch Ness is here in Scotland, in case you didn't know. And Scotland is here in the world, in case you forgot. Not like anyone could forget Scotland, though.
I'm Scottish!
The most relevant sighting after this was in 1939 when the famous photograph was taken. Many people have claimed to see a whale-like fish or a stubby-legged creature on the shore and in the water of the loch. The Loch Ness Monster has been described most similarly as a plesiosaur, a Mesozoic marine reptile that went extinct 65 million years ago.
Oh god, what is that?
It's a Leopleurodon, Charlie. Magical Leopleurodon. It's gonna guide our way to Candy Mountain.
Initially, I was skeptical about the creature existing, because it's such a large reptile in such a cold climate. However, you could argue that since it's a marine reptile, it probably has some sort of blubber on it. My main source of doubt now is that even though it is a large lake, you would expect to see more members of the species floating around. I'm not a fan of the theories that claim that there's only one animal in a cryptid species left, and it just somehow lives forever. I prefer to speculate about cryptid species rather than one-off individual creatures, which means we have to figure out a population of creatures. I was also doubtful about the size of the lake compared to the creature, but upon further research I realized that Loch Ness is actually pretty big. It seems like there would be substantial space for a giant plesiosaur to hide. There's also a theory that the Loch Ness Monster could be based on a particularly large European eel, but evidence for giant eels is minimal. I'm a huge supporter of the fact that aliens could exist.
What?
No, I don't support ancient alien theories. I don't think the US government has contacted them, and I don't think that whatever this thing is an alien. I like alien theories and alien culture, especially when they aren't being used as a political distraction. I believe that aliens could have existed in the past, and I think they will exist in the future. This doesn't mean that they'll be highly intelligent and have UFOs and laser guns, as cool as that is, but they will simply be life from other planets. I personally like to think that Mars and Venus had life in our past. I think that before the sun got too hot, Venus was cool enough to have water and possibly bacteria living on it, if not more advanced life forms. I think before the core of Mars cooled and it still had a magnetic field to protect it from radiation, it had water and rivers. And yes, bacteria. I think that as the sun expands and the Goldilocks zone gets pushed further back in our solar system, the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn will become hosts to life. And part of me kind of envies their view. Imagine having Jupiter as your sunrise and sunset. It would be goddamn beautiful. I feel something similar could happen with Neptune and maybe even Pluto. I think the universe is too large and expansive for us to be the only forms of life on it. We've seen other planets that would be habitable for humans. Granted, not every species has to breathe oxygen and drink water, but if there's more planets like Earth, there could be more creatures like us. It's a scary thought to think that we're the only intelligent life in the universe, or even just the only habitable planet in general. Imagine if we're the first and only instance of the universe experiencing itself. Does it mean we have more responsibility, or are we only doing what comes natural? Bigfoot, I definitely think existed.
He's Bigfoot, he's Bigfoot.
Let's get something established. This footage of Bigfoot is nothing. We can debate the purpose behind the creation of this footage, but really, it's irrelevant to our goal here. This is not a Sasquatch. The first North American Bigfoot sightings come from indigenous cultures who claim to see large hairy creatures stalking in the forest. There are cave paintings of these creatures that date to over 500 years old. Sightings continued on through the colonization period and up into the modern day. The creatures have been called hairy men, dark watchers, gorilla men, and cannibals. The creatures have been said to hunt livestock and steal from beaver traps. I'm not entirely convinced that a Bigfoot-like creature still exists in the Pacific Northwest nowadays. However, I do think it may have existed there in the past. Over 2 million years ago, there existed a great ape species called Gigantopithecus blacki, which was likely related to orangutans. The creature mainly lived in Southeast Asia, and went extinct around 350,000 years ago. It's cool to think that humans were interacting with monstrous primates around the same time we were utilizing fire. These giant primates were roaming around and we were already doing our thing. The Bering Land Bridge, which connects Asia and North America, existed 35,000 years ago. The only fossils that have been found of the great ape have been mandibles and teeth. So we could play around with the timeline a little bit and say that maybe we just haven't found enough evidence and fossils of the creature, and we could fantasize about the idea that the creature crossed the Bering Land Bridge along with many other species, and started populating the Pacific Northwest, becoming what people claim to be Bigfoot. A much simpler creature to pin it as is the Yeti, since Gigantopithecus already lived in Southeast Asia and the Himalayas are like right there. It's cool to imagine the creature migrating into the mountains and having its fur turn white to adapt to its surroundings. The unicorn absolutely existed, but it wasn't a horse.
Unicorn, all right, give me a horn.
No!
Yes!
No, get away!
Come here, you, give me a horn, buddy.
The unicorn first appeared in art around 2000 BC in the Bronze Age Indus Valley civilizations. It's also appeared in Greek mythology and medieval art. Also, it's the national animal of Scotland.
I'm Scottish!
And while there's never been any fossil evidence of a horse with a horn coming out of its forehead, we have something very weirdly similar. The Siberian unicorn, known as Elasmotherium, went extinct about 39 to 29,000 years ago. It's very likely that early modern humans and this unicorn interacted. It had a horn which possibly grew to be a meter long, and it had long galloping legs like a horse. It was more closely related to a rhino than a horse, but rhinos and horses are related. And tapirs. The Siberian unicorn lived in the Eurasian steppe, and fossils have been found in Kazakhstan. The Siberian unicorn went extinct due to drastic changes in climate, which reduced the northern Eurasian grasslands that it relied on. The Thunderbird is a creature from Native American indigenous folklore. It's said to create thunder with its wings and lightning with its eyes. It is likely that the real-life Thunderbird was a member of the Pterotornithidae family, related to New World vultures and condors that lived in North and South America. In North America, fossils have been found of Pterotornis subspecies in the La Brea tar pits in California, as well as in Nevada and Oregon. These species had wingspans ranging from 11 to 13 feet, and they went extinct about 12 to 10,000 years ago. In South America, fossil evidence was discovered of Argentavis magnificens, which is likewise in the Pterotornithidae family. It was a massive bird with a wingspan of up to 26 feet wide. Argentavis went extinct around 11,000 years ago, as the large mammals began to die off. For perspective, humans entered North America around 20 to 15,000 years ago, and they entered South America around 14 to 12,000 years ago, so it's a guarantee that they interacted with these giant birds. The Thunderbird is a folklore to North American natives, who still would have seen a pretty massive bird with the 13-foot wide Pterotornis species, but this was only half the size of Argentavis. Maybe Argentavis migrated to North America now and then, just to visit the cousins. The modern ancestor to Argentavis is the Andean condor, which has a wingspan of about 11 feet, making it one of the largest flying birds in the world. The actual largest flying bird by wingspan is the wandering albatross, with a wingspan of 12.1 feet. Argentavis is one of the largest flying birds to have ever existed, but the actual largest flying bird by wingspan to have ever existed was the Pelagornis. Pelagornis was a massive seabird that went extinct around 12,000 years ago. Its fossils can be found on every continent. Is this the actual Thunderbird? Probably not, but who knows? People can see more than one giant bird and call it the same thing in their folklore. Personally, I'd like to stick with the Pterotornis being the Thunderbird inspiration. Pterotornis probably didn't shoot lightning out of its eyes, but with a bird that big, you better believe it sounded like thunder. Dragons can be found in the mythologies and cultures of people from every continent that humans inhabit. The first dragon myth likely came from India. A dragon named Vritra came from the early Vedic religion and is thought to be a personification of drought. This dragon myth was recorded around 2100 BCE. The Mesopotamians described their dragons as scaly animals with hind legs like an eagle and the forelimbs of a lion. Dragons can be seen in the cultures of China, Scandinavia, the Australian Aboriginals, North Africa, and the indigenous Americans. The mythology of dragons likely came from ancient humans seeing dinosaur fossils and adding a dose of imagination. However, there's many species nowadays that could have inspired the dragon myth. We have lizards that can shoot blood out of their eyes and that have venomous spit. These could have easily inspired the fire-breathing aspect of the myth. We also have giant reptiles like crocodiles and alligators, which are found on nearly every continent. It's likely that the dragon that St. George fought was a crocodile in North Africa. We also have the Komodo dragon, which although it does have a very limited range nowadays, it definitely fits the bill. It's a massive, venomous, violent reptile that eats buffalo and hunts down corpses. Fossils of the Komodo dragon can be found in India and Australia, so it's likely that it could have inspired the dragon myths of this entire region. Megalania is an extinct species of giant monitor lizard that specifically inhabited Australia. It could grow up to 23 feet long and be 4,000 pounds. The species went extinct around 50,000 years ago, which is just around when humans inhabited Australia, so the two definitely could have interacted. Humans have a lot of fun and strange versions of dragons, but between the prehistoric dinosaurs of the air, land, and sea, and the modern giant reptiles that we still see to this day, it's safe to say that dragons have always existed. The Chupacabra is something that I always believed to exist, just not the way we usually think about it. The Chupacabra is a surprisingly recent cryptid. The first claimed killings of it occurred in 1975, when the vampire of Mocha, a small town in Puerto Rico, was reported to have killed livestock. Originally, the killings were attributed to a satanic cult, but similar livestock killings were occurring elsewhere, where the livestock was bled dry through a series of small circular cuts. The first eyewitness account of the Chupacabra occurred in 1995, also in Puerto Rico, in an area where 150 farm animals and pets were reportedly killed. Chupacabra incidents have been reported all across the Americas, from as far south as Argentina all the way up to the United States. And here's the thing, the Chupacabra is real. That's because Chupacabra just means goat sucker. Anything can be a goat sucker, or anyone. Where my doubt comes in is the way the Chupacabra is presented. We often see this imagery of a spiky, scaly, reptilian alien creature, and I just don't think that's real. More than likely the Chupacabra is a rabid dog or coyote that has mange. The lack of hair could explain the scaly, leathery skin that people report. It's likely that these feral dogs were looking for a meal and began attacking livestock. I don't think there's a species of Chupacabra, more so it's just a title for a creature that is attacking livestock. The fact that the blood is drained from the livestock is very strange though. Trust me, I know we're all sick of hearing about zombies. The 2010s was oversaturated in zombie culture.
We make it work with a little bit of swag.
But depending on your interpretation, zombies are real. The idea of zombies, or at least people returning from the dead, dates back to the ancient Greeks. Archaeological sites contain skeletons pinned down by large rocks to prevent them from rising from the dead. Zombie folklore is most often associated with Haiti and voodoo. It's thought that the afterlife of a zombie is an allegory for the plight of slavery. In regards to voodoo, some people may be turned into zombies by a practitioner known as a bokor. A so-called zombie powder may be created, which contains herbs, shells, fish, animal parts, and tetrodotoxin, a deadly neurotoxin found in pufferfish.
Oh, SpongeBob! Why?
The powder can cause difficulty walking, mental confusion, and respiratory problems. It can also lead to paralysis and coma, with the afflicted individual eventually regaining consciousness and appearing to revive from the dead, even after being buried alive, which leads to a more loose definition of a zombie. That is to say, would you consider somebody who is legally dead for a few minutes and then revived to be a zombie? Technically, the dead have come back to life. Does a matchbox wood frog freezing and thawing count as the dead coming to life? Its heart stops. What about cryogenic freezing? If you're familiar with The Last of Us, you'll know that there is a zombie fungus that does exist. Ophiocordyceps unilateralis is a pathogenic fungus discovered in 1859 that usually affects carpenter ants in tropical regions. The fungus compels the ant to leave its nest, latch onto a leaf, and wait there until it dies. Over the course of days, the fungus grows until it's able to reproduce and create more spores. Another way that you can argue that zombification is real is with chronic wasting disease. This is a prion disease that affects deer and moose in North America and some parts of Eurasia. Some symptoms of chronic wasting disease include deteriorating condition of the physical body, excessive salivation, which is likely linked to the spread of the disease, loss of weight, a lack of energy, hindered motor skills which can result in stumbling, a loss of fear in humans, aggression, decreased interactions with other members of their species, and a blank stare. They basically become a walking corpse. The disease is likely spread through food, soil, or water, contaminated with infected blood, feces, spit, or urine. These deer don't act like traditional zombies where they actively bite other members of their species to infect them, but they are actively decaying and could spread the disease through their bite if they chose to. Luckily, this disease does not currently affect humans. So technically we have a few different types of zombies to choose from, but at the end of the day, zombies are in fact real. And these have been the top 10 cryptids that I believe are most likely to have ever existed or still exist to this day.
9!
With one honorable mention. And that's the 4-leaf clover. I swear to God, 4-leaf clovers are real. You can look that up. They're not a myth. I've seen them with my own eyes. I took a picture when I was 10, but it was on my crappy flip phone and I lost the SD card. There's even a 5-leaf clover. I'm telling you the truth. You have to believe me. I swear they're real. I'm not crazy. Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me.